5 years ago, a majority of British people decided to leave the EU. The British writer and Germanist James Hawes saw Brexit coming. He has a historical explanation ready. It is due to the age-old division in British society. England wasn't even named England, as the author James Hawes already identified the first gulf in the country between the north and the south. More than 2,000 years ago, 55 before BC, Julius Caesar set out for the island for the first time, initially not as a conqueror, but as a discoverer. In the interior of the country, he encounters the long-established population, but on the south coast, he encounters Belgian immigrants who are still extremely contentious. 150 years later, the southeast has come to terms with the Roman conquerors. The region is a prosperous and peaceful colony. The west and north, on the other hand, do not make it easy for Rome, and perhaps themselves, to do so. This division is the common thread that runs through James Hawes' The Shortest History of England from then on. 3 centuries before the Norman conquest, the borders between England and its neighbours were basically the same as they are today. And even then, there was talk of a north-south divide among the English, he wrote. Soon the Vikings will invade. They reinforce the contrasts. And the Normans? With their campaign against the north and their cultural hegemony, they are tearing a ditch that separates the now French-speaking elites, Hawes says, from the ordinary English to this day. A ditch? That reminds me of something. The common English, 90% of the population, have been left without their own leadership. By adopting the language and culture of their conquerors, the surviving English elite had permanently removed themselves from the rest of their population, he wrote. In the Wars of the Roses, the language of the South becomes the epitome of education. The North continues to fall away. This inequality still echoes today, says James Hawes. The country was always divided by geography, geology, and culture. And then, the English are all too easy to forget themselves. It was ruled for 500 years by an elite that spoke French, with which it follows that to this day the English elite and the English people speak almost different languages. The German scholar and writer Hawes already drew attention to himself 4 years ago when he wrote The Shortest History of Germany. In it, he argued that the division into West and East Germany was by no means artificial, but rather was already laid out within the borders of historical Germany along the river Elbe. Now he takes a look at England, and once again the historical dividing lines run along a river. According to Hawes, what the Elbe was in Germany is the Trent in England, which flows through the Midlands. The river not only draws a geographical boundary that cannot be overcome for a long time, or could have been overcome for a long time, but also a linguistic, economic, political, religious, and social one. In addition, there are class differences that intensify when, in the 16th century, farmland that had previously been used collectively was given to landowners alone. Enclosures made landowners richer, helped the better of peasantry, and created the greatest destabilizing factor in any society, a class of poor with no hope that anything could ever get better for them, he wrote. Industrialization also only allowed the North to flourish briefly with its natural resources and labor. It doesn't manage to catch up with the elitist South. The Empire and the United Kingdom are expanding their rule, but in Hawes' interpretation, they are only able to create national unity temporarily, if at all. James Hawes said, the country, together with its deep historical divisions, has held up behind Great Britain, behind the United Kingdom, and of course behind the world empire for 300 years, so to speak. But now the empire is long gone. Ireland is long gone. Scotland will be gone soon too. And then the English are alone in the world and will finally have to ask themselves the question of what they really are. What Hawes is describing is, of course, a consequence of Brexit. And here we move on to the motive of his narrative. While the supporters of the exit from the EU are sounding like leading the UK to a new old size and unity, Hawes is convinced of the exact opposite. For him, the Brexit is the sleight of hand of a conservative clique around the current Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who instrumentalized the long division of the country to pretend to be the savior of the English people. And English-born Hawes said, "This is not the first time that the English have been asked to kick their Europe-friendly, liberty-robbing, lofty, foreign-speaking elite with a big kick by a full member of that very elite. And that's not the first time they did exactly that." Hawes is not writing that, but a history of England. His perspective is particularly interesting at a time when the history of England and Great Britain is highly controversial. Brexiteers on the one hand conjure up the greatness of England, while critical voices question the colonial past of the kingdom on the other side. Right from the start, the book has been driven by Hawes' thesis of division, and it helps to keep an eye on them. Otherwise, you can lose the thread at the breakneck speed with which Hawes plows through 2,000 years of history on just 385 pages. Especially in the first part, the names of kings, dukes, and counts just fly past you. But anyone who is willing to follow Hawes' thesis, or to rub against it, and to understand his book not only as a historical treatise, but also as a polemic, reads the shortest history of England with great profit. And I'm not getting a cent for saying that. It's not an advertisement for the book, but the thesis is really interesting, and that's why I chose to make this video. I'll see you in my next video. Auf Wiedersehen.